Welcome back. Okay, what I would like to do in this video is go over the parts of a sewing machine. Now, the machine you have may not be like the machine you see here on the screen, but I'm going to go over the parts and they are probably very similar, even though you may have a different model. This is a Brother machine, LX3817. Okay, first up we have the socket or jack, and this is the area into which you will plug your foot pedal or controller, as well as the power supply. So I would say this is the most important part of the machine because this allows you to operate the machine. And above that, on this particular machine, above that, there is the switch to turn the machine on and off. It controls that, and it also controls the light. You turn the light on and off that way, as well as the power. Then going up, we have the hand wheel. This allows you to lift the needle up and down manually. Sometimes this comes in handy when you're sewing using the pedal. You may still need to use the hand wheel to sew slower stitches, or to sew more slowly. Up here we have the spool pin. This is where the thread goes, and this can be adjusted to be tall or short because you may have short thread like what I'm showing here. So you can put it up or down, just depending on what you need. And this is the bobbin winder. This is where we'll put the bobbin in order to put thread on that, which we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And right in that same area, you'll see this hole. This is if you have an extra spool pin to put in. Sometimes you want to sew with two threads at once using what's called a twin needle. If you're creating maybe some decorative stitches on woven fabrics or for knit fabrics, it can help make your seams a little bit more, a little stronger. So you can stick an extra spool pin in that hole and use two threads at once. Now I am going over to the area that's called the thread guide, and this is going to be useful when you're threading your machine. On this machine, it shows you all these different diagrams to help you understand how to thread the machine, and it's pretty straightforward, but you may want to make sure you get it right because your machine will not sew correctly if the thread is not, or if it's not threaded correctly. So here I'm just showing you one of the parts, the part inside, which is called the take up lever. It's just a lever inside, which is useful for threading the machine and necessary for threading the machine properly. So that's just right there inside the machine, and that can be controlled with the hand wheel as well. Over here we have the stitch guide. You can choose the stitches that you want to do. If you want decorative stitches, straight stitches, you can do a buttonhole using this wheel. That's where you will get it, find it. I typically leave mine on about 9. Now this little hole right here, this is the buttonhole adjustment screw. You can adjust the stitches when you're making a buttonhole. You can adjust the stitches on the buttonhole by sticking a screwdriver in here and tightening this up. Now, I was just digging out a piece of chalk that was in mine because I'm sure one of my children did that, probably the youngest one. So it took me a minute, but I finally got that piece of chalk out, and I'm just trying to show you the inside that you can insert a screw in there and adjust the stitches for the buttonhole if you're doing that. This little knob here is very important. This controls the tension for the upper thread, and if your tension is not correct, your seams will not sew correctly. So you want to make sure you have that right. I'm usually somewhere in the 3 to 5 range with mine, but it can go up or down just depending on what I'm sewing. Right here, I was just showing the numbers for the threading guide. It gives you step by step. It shows you step by step which way the thread should go, with I think like 1 through 5. Can't really see it that well here, but there is a 1 at the top, then a 2, 3, 4, 5. It just shows you the way to take the thread to properly thread the machine. Right here I'm using my book light to hopefully help you see the numbers better, but on your machine you should have something similar. You can see the 4 at the top right there, and then the 5 coming down, and then you go ahead and thread the needle at the bottom. So that comes in very handy when you're first learning and need to thread the machine properly. And over time, you'll find that you can just do it instinctively. You can just do it without even having to use that guide. Now right here, I am attempting to show you how to put in and take out a sewing needle. I didn't realize how tightly my screw is in right here. This is where you turn the screw and you can take out the needle. But for some reason, this is super tight. I'm not sure what happened, but I was unable to get this off for the purpose of the video, which was very interesting to me. I gave it a really good try for a few minutes and was unable to get that off. So what I did was I went to my other machine in a different room to show you that this is supposed to screw off pretty easily, and you just take the needle out once you unscrew it. Sometimes you may need to change your needle. It becomes dull, it may break. You just need to put a new needle in, and you always put the needle in with the flat side facing the back. When you get a machine needle, you'll notice that one side is curved, one side is flat. So always put it in with the flat side facing the back of the machine and the curved side facing the front. Okay, so back to this machine. That was the bobbin plate that I slid off of there, and this is the bobbin. So on these machines, this is a drop-in bobbin style machine, and it uses these little plastic bobbins. Now, I've had all sorts of machines in my days of sewing and design. I've had, I don't know if it's called like a front facing bobbin where you put it in like at the front of the machine, and they've been metal. I remember in design school, we had to purchase a bobbin case. It was like $70. Now the bobbin cases are built into these machines and you just put the bobbin in. And see, that's where you put the thread on the bobbin up top. So the bobbin is very necessary because it provides the bottom row of thread or stitching when you're sewing. So you have the top thread, which is what goes through the needle, and then you have a thread coming up from the bottom, which is the bobbin thread. So that's very important, and it's very important that you put it in correctly as well. And I think maybe that's what I'm showing right here is putting it in. You put it in with the thread coming off of the bobbin counterclockwise, and then there's like a little slit in there that you have to get it through, and that has to be correct. This little part can come off. It's called the flatbed accessory compartment. You can keep some extra supplies in there, bobbins and things like that. This one is so different from ones I've had in the past that have an actual door. It's useful when sewing sometimes to take that off, depending on what you are sewing. Sometimes for sleeves and different things, you'll need to remove that part to allow for more space in positioning your fabric. But we'll go over that sometime. Okay, now right here on top of the machine where your thread will be, there are these little guidelines to help you know how wide of a seam that you're sewing. You can just line your fabric up with these lines, and these lines have fractions to reflect how wide of a seam will be produced if you sew up against those lines. The standard seam allowance is 5/8 inches, so that's on there, as well as some other measurements like 1/2, I think 3/8 is on there. So those can come in handy as you're sewing. And the presser foot right there, which I did not even mention, I don't know if I showed it clearly in this video. The presser foot is very essential to sewing. It's what is going to be holding the fabric down as it's getting passed through the machine. If you line your fabric up with the presser foot, that should give you about 1/4 inch wide of a seam allowance. And some of this will make more sense as you see me demonstrate the actual sewing. And I'm wondering if, so I believe that's it. I think I've covered some of the primary parts. There is an air vent on the machine that I didn't really point out, but I'll insert this part here. It's very important to not cover that up. It just allows air to go through the machine and circulate around the motor as the machine is going, because there is a motor inside this machine. So the vent needs to be kept clear so the air can circulate properly. And right here, I'm threading the machine. I just took it over from the spool and I'm just following the guides on the machine to show you just how to thread the machine. At this point, I just do this almost with my eyes closed. And over time, if you sew on a regular basis, it'll be the same. You'll just be able to thread it with no problems. Now, this is a mechanical machine. Some of the computerized machines will automatically thread the needle for you, and that can be really nice. I've used those a few times in the past. But on these mechanical machines, you just do it by hand. And as I said, the more you do it, the more it just becomes like second nature to you. And right here, I'm just threading the needle. Before that, you should pass the needle through. Before doing that, you should put the needle behind the needle threader and it keeps it in place, and then you pass it through the needle. I didn't realize I wasn't recording because I was showing you how to get the thread around the bobbin before you wind it up on the machine. But that's what I'm doing here. And I'll just create a quick YouTube short to show you how to wrap the thread around the bobbin and then fill it with thread. And so that's what's happening on this part. This machine doesn't have it, but on some machines there's a way to pull this hand wheel out so it doesn't have to spin when you're winding your bobbin. You can pull it out, then push it back in when it's done. But this machine doesn't have that. I wanted to come back and say that this is the reverse sewing lever. This is very important for doing back stitches, which is going to help make your seams stronger. You can notice here that when I pushed the reverse lever down and it goes back up, you can see this part of the machine moving. That's called the feed dog. And speaking of very important parts that I forgot to mention, this is called the feed dog. This is the part of the machine that will hold and move your fabric through the machine and make sure you have even stitches, as well as that the fabric is going through smoothly. So the feed dog is very important, and you can see it moving there. And that's basically it for this particular machine. Any parts that I miss, I'll go over as I'm making sewing videos. If there's some part that I realize I didn't tell you about, I'll do that in another video. If you have questions or comments, let me know. Thanks for watching.